Jim Harbaugh talked about the offensive line like a coach trying not to tip his hand. Mike McDaniel already came in changing the shape of this offense. Jeffery Simmons is suddenly one of those names that could flip this defense on its head. And Joel Bitonio is still sitting out there while the Chargers still have room to do something. This does not feel like a quiet offseason. It feels like pieces are moving before the real swing comes. And that is the point. Los Angeles cannot go into 2026 thinking small, because when you have Justin Herbert and all the pressure that comes with the AFC, hesitation is a luxury you do not have. So hit subscribe right now, because the read today is simple. This is a contender feeling real pressure. And here's the main pressure point. The Chargers' offensive line still is not settled. And Jim Harbaugh basically let that slip when he spoke at the annual owners meeting in Phoenix. He obviously tried not to give away draft strategy, but coaches do not talk casually at this point in the calendar. When Harbaugh answers that way about the state of the O-line, it does not sound like a group that is finished. It sounds like a job still in progress. And for a team that wants to get serious in the AFC race, that matters a lot. Because fans watched free agency roll by, saw the cap space, saw names moving around, and the major move never came. The addition of Tyler Biadasz mattered, no doubt, but beyond that, there has still been this strange feeling hanging over the plan. Not because the front office looks lost, but because it clearly chose not to spend recklessly. And that is the delicate part of this whole thing. That can be smart discipline if the plan is strong, but it can also turn into a costly delay if the answer comes too late. That is why the 2026 draft matters so much here. With Mike McDaniel taking over the offense, the kind of offensive lineman Los Angeles needs has changed. Out goes a structure tied more to power and gap concepts, which tracked with the Greg Roman era, and in comes a wide zone approach that demands movement skills, timing, and the ability to climb to the second level. So it is not enough to just grab any guard. It has to be the right guard for what this offense is trying to become. That narrows the margin for error and raises the stakes on every evaluation. And that is where Jennings-Dunker starts to make a lot of sense. He is Iowa's right tackle right now, but the projection to guard in the NFL is very real and very believable. That is not forcing a name into a need. He has already shown interior traits. He comes from a system with outside zone influence. He moves well, he finishes with edge, and he has that finisher mentality Harbaugh has always loved. That part is tangible. The part that is still projection is how far the Chargers' interest could actually go, but the fit is there, and it is hard to miss. And the story gets even more telling because of what it says underneath the surface. If Los Angeles is already looking at offensive line help in the draft, then the franchise knows it still needs more of a foundation in front of Justin Herbert to support the offensive shift it wants to make. A real contender does not treat protection for its franchise quarterback like some minor offseason note. It treats it like a structural priority. But if the offensive line conversation shows a roster that still needs work, the market opens a far more explosive door here, because the name that started popping up is not a rotation piece, not a bargain gamble, and not some depth chart band-aid. The name is Jeffery Simmons. And the second you bring a player like that into the conversation, the entire read on the Chargers changes. Let's separate it the right way. At this point, we are talking about market read, fit, and a rumor that feels plausible. There is no confirmation that talks are happening. There is no official sign that Los Angeles is close to pulling off that move. But this is not some random name floating around for no reason either. When you look at a team with room for a serious swing, contender ambitions, and a need to get more physical on defense, Simmons naturally lands in the middle of that conversation. And he does because he would change the identity of the unit. This is not the kind of player you bring in just to deepen the rotation. He changes the tone. He changes how opponents prepare. He raises the violence level in the trenches, caves the pocket from the inside, and pushes the defense toward a version of itself that is far more aggressive and far harder to deal with. And that lines up directly with what Jim Harbaugh wants to build in Los Angeles. A tougher team, a more imposing team, a nastier team for any AFC offense to handle. That is why this possibility feels so strong. The Chargers already have the quarterback. They already have a foundation good enough to compete. They already have a head coach who clearly wants to raise the physical standard of this roster. So eventually, the next step cannot just be stacking medium-level moves. At some point, the next step has to be a player who lifts the ceiling of the whole franchise. Jeffery Simmons is exactly that kind of name. He would not be a move to round out the roster. He would be a statement. And maybe that is why so many people still feel like Los Angeles has not played its real hand this offseason. The more restrained free agency period created doubt, and fairly so. But there is another way to read it. Instead of spending impulsively, the front office may be holding resources for a better opportunity. That is still interpretation. It is not an established fact. But when the player you are talking about is someone of Simmons' caliber, that interpretation stops sounding forced and starts sounding pretty logical. If this story picks up over the next few weeks, it will not be random. It will be because the fit between player, timing, and competitive ambition is too strong to ignore. But the escalation does not stop with the market. It moves inside the building when Jim Harbaugh talks about Mike McDaniel like someone who just found a higher gear for the offense. And there is an important distinction here. This is not rumor, and it is not reading too much into smoke. The quote is real. Harbaugh used that candle and light bulb analogy to explain the impact McDaniel has had in their conversations about offensive football. And when a coach like Harbaugh talks like that in public, he is signaling more than excitement. He is signaling belief. Because the truth is, the Chargers' offense needed a jolt. Greg Roman had his place, but there were moments when things clearly stalled out. The offense lost some fluidity at key points. The team became more predictable than it should have been, and that wild card loss to the Patriots only made that feeling heavier. So when Los Angeles brings in Mike McDaniel, it is not just a name change on the coaching staff. It is an admission that something different had to be sparked on offense. Different creativity, different structure, a different way to unlock Justin Herbert. And that is where this story climbs another level. If McDaniel can really bring over part of the offensive vision that made him stand out over the last few years, the Chargers stop looking like just another competitive team and start pushing toward that group that actually scares the AFC. That is the bet. It is still not a guarantee, and that matters, because a coordinator change by itself does not fix everything. But the internal signal Harbaugh is sending is strong. Really strong. It does not sound like a routine coach quote. It sounds like a coach who sees a tool that could change the ceiling of the team. And when you stack all of it together, the need to reinforce the line, the possibility of a major defensive move, and now an offensive coordinator being talked about almost like the spark for a transformation, that is why this Chargers moment does not feel ordinary. There is pressure, absolutely. But there is also a sense that the franchise understands it cannot keep living in the middle. Either it turns this thing on for real, or it keeps knocking on the door without ever getting through it. Now comes the contrast that makes all of this more interesting and more uncomfortable at the same time. While the Chargers think about the future of the line through the draft, Joel Bitonio is still sitting there on the open market as a veteran solution that feels affordable in theory and dangerously logical for a team that still has not locked down left guard. And here it matters to separate fact from interpretation. Fact. Garrett Podell of CBS Sports put Bitonio among the best free agents still available and connected him to other possible fits, especially the Ravens. Also fact. The veteran guard is still unsigned even after a season where he still protected the passer well and allowed only 2 sacks, along with a strong pass protection grade. The interpretation comes after that. If a player like this is still available, the Chargers should at least be monitoring the situation. Because the setup in Los Angeles still demands an answer. Tyler Biadasz came in at center. Cole Strange projects on the right side, but left guard is still open. And Trevor Penning being viewed as a possible favorite for that spot does not erase the uncertainty. Could it work? Maybe. Does it fully settle you? Not yet. And a contender that is serious about protecting Justin Herbert cannot treat that position like a side issue while a name like this is still available. Now, without overstating it, Bitonio is not the same player he was at his absolute peak. That is part of the market discussion too. There are natural signs of wear, there is age, and there is the question of how much high-level play he can still hold over a full season. But that is exactly why the contrast in this story is so sharp. On one side, the franchise is thinking about tomorrow through the draft. On the other, the market is offering a ready-made veteran, experienced, technical, and backed by a long track record of consistency. So the real question is not just whether Bitonio fits, it is what message the Chargers want to send right now. Total patience until the draft? Or a veteran move that stabilizes the line and lowers the risk of going into a results-driven season still too thin up front? I want your read on that. If you were sitting in Joe Hortiz's chair today, would you go after Joel Bitonio on a value deal? Or would you hold everything for the draft? Because that decision says a lot about how serious Los Angeles is about accelerating this thing for real. In the end, the read that stays with you is pretty clear. The Chargers are not standing still, they are stacking signals. Harbaugh is leaving it out there that the offensive line still needs help. Jeffery Simmons is surfacing as a market opportunity that could raise the defense a level. Mike McDaniel is arriving with real talk of transformation on offense. And Joel Bitonio shows up as the perfect contrast between veteran urgency and a draft-based gamble. None of these developments alone tells the whole story, but together, they all point the same way. Los Angeles is under contender pressure, and this is not the time to waste the window on lukewarm decisions. So if you believe this franchise is building toward the right kind of leap, stay with the channel and come back for the next video, because the next move could completely reshape this season.